Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Collegian Football Podcast. Before this game this weekend, Alexis, I just want to throw a quick stat out there about Penn State-Maryland games before we get going. Penn State, in their last two matchups, College Park, looked it up. Score combined between the last two matchups, 125-3.
It's like a second home stadium to Penn State
well,
almost.
Believe me, they're going to need it this weekend. Both teams are desperate for wins. It's going to be a really interesting matchup. Of course, we're going to get to that. We're going to talk about Ohio State from last weekend and, some individual guys who are really performing well also at the moment. So, let's just dive into it. Is there any time other than now where you need to win more? Seriously, it has gotten to the point where, you're at 5 wins and you need 6 to be bowl eligible.
Got to get over the hump this week.
We're not going to ever act like we were bringing up college football playoff implications or Rose Bowl or anything like that. So let's pretend that never happened.
Yeah, for sure. And you can't lose to Maryland 2 years in a row. That's just morality. Like this team has had the potential to knock off, some of the top teams in the country. You lose to Illinois, you can't have another trap game not go your way this time. It just can't happen. And if they don't win this game, it's going to be incredibly difficult for them to get bowl eligible, with the exception of, maybe
they got Rutgers.
Maybe that Rutgers matchup at home, but hopefully for their sake in that locker room, they get over the hump this week, because if not, that's just going to be a drop in morality.
It'll get to the point of dysfunction where you could tell. We were at practice yesterday. Their spirits were high. I thought it was a good practice for them from just what we saw. But at the same time, you lose 4 games in a row after you start 4-0, after going 4-0, then you lose all these games, and it just gets to a point where it's like last year, where it feels like it's never going to end. And also the implications, what it could bring is, obviously James Franklin is no secret, being touted for all these coaching positions, and couldn't get my words together there. But anyway, it looks bad on him too. So programs like USC, programs like LSU that are looking to hire him, it could get really interesting from a standpoint of, are these schools looking at his success this season, or are they basically basing it off of his history and what he's done at Penn State, Vanderbilt, etc. But in a season where Penn State had all these expectations of being, among the gold standard in the Big Ten, among Ohio State, Michigan State, it would be interesting to see what teams and other programs think about, starting 5-0 and then, of course, just collapsing mid-season, almost the opposite way of what they did last year. So it'll be interesting from a Franklin perspective, but it's also interesting from a perspective where, is this going to affect recruiting? Is this going to affect transfers wanting to come here? Are they going to think that they have an opportunity to win? So this game, as you're a 5-3 team at this point. You're not winning the Big Ten. You're not, of course, going to the playoff or anything. It's more of, I don't want to say for pride, because it's not just for pride. It's for a lot of other things that could affect your program well down the road. So this is a bigger game, I think, that people are leading onto. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they come out.
Yeah, absolutely. And Franklin talked a lot about his recruiting connections at Maryland, because he was on the Maryland coaching staff for 8 years, built a lot of connections there with high school coaches in the area. He mentioned yesterday about how he's known Arnold Ebiketti's coach from high school for 20 years. That's insane. So this is a good weekend for recruiting as well. I'm sure they're going to have a lot of prospective future Nittany Lions in the audience. So it's going to be a big weekend for recruiting as well. But, comparing last week's showing at Ohio State to the week before that against Illinois, Penn State looked incredibly more prepared for the Buckeyes. If you put that next to how they came out against Illinois, it just looks completely different. They absolutely came out as a different team. Maybe they didn't come out with the win, but still they did a lot of good things that they're going to be able to build on for the rest of the season. And Sean Clifford being healthy certainly helped them on offense. Mike Yurcich's play calling was absolutely fine in that game. Like, they were so efficient on third down, probably one of the best third down conversion rates we've seen from this team all season. And it honestly, on defense as well, it was good too. Ohio State rarely found the end zone, and they had to settle for field goals a lot. But all around, Penn State was absolutely more prepared for Ohio State than they were against Illinois.
Yeah, so for me, it all starts with defensively. I thought their run defense was night and day from what we saw against Illinois, and that's got to be all credit to the two young guys that are filling in for P.J. Musford, Devon Elise, and Keziah Izzard. I mean, they were really struggling against Illinois, and of course, Illinois, the difference between that and Ohio State, Illinois was, of course, throwing a few things at Penn State that they weren't maybe prepared for on film, like the packages with the extra linemen, extra tight ends, some 12 personnel. So, I mean, they got taken by surprise, but of course, you can't lose to a team that, by the way, lost to Rutgers last weekend. So that's not great.
Gotta adjust on the fly.
Yeah, I still don't know how that happened, quite frankly, but we're just going to move on from that.
Yeah.
But it's Ohio State, the run defense was awesome, and besides that one big run that Henderson had in the second half, I thought that they really did a nice job of, containing him and containing, all their runners, because they have some really talented guys, including Stroud, who can get on the move too. So that's something that they're definitely going to want to emulate this weekend. And offensively, like you said, I thought Mike Yurcich arguably had his best game in a Penn State, not uniform, but I guess
on the Penn State sideline.
Yeah, blue and white apparel. But I thought the creativity, especially in the red zone, was really critical to their success because they were 3 for 3 in the red zone. They converted every time they got down there. And if you noticed, I did a little film review on it this week.
Yes.
But it is really interesting because on all 3 touchdowns they scored, it was scored in like a unique package or a unique way. The one was the Dotson touchdown where they had him lined up with Tyler Warren. They had, Brenton Strange motioning in the backfield for the first touchdown. And on the third touchdown, I loved it. We saw that, 3-man backfield with, I think it was Kevon, Brenton Strange, and Noah Cain.
Yep.
So, yeah, that was really interesting. And, that was a 3rd and goal play, too, to tie the game. So that was a huge play at the time. So I thought the creativity from Yurcich in the red zone, and also, they were able to get a lot of chunk yardage, especially in the second half. And I thought it was really impressive just to be able to perform like that against a team as talented as we know as Ohio State after coming out against Illinois and putting up a dud. But, so I thought that was very good by them.
Yeah, let's move on to Maryland this weekend. They're, as we mentioned before, same record as Penn State, both 5-3, and this is a team that if Penn State was in a different situation now where they had strung more wins together, you would think that this would just be, a rest week where you could just get some of your depth and rotational guys in there. But they're going to have to fight for this win in order to become bowl eligible. As we move into this game, Justin, who are some players we want to watch for on the Maryland team?
Yeah, well, obviously Talia Tagovailoa is the guy who will be the quarterback for them. He trust me, he had his success against them last year. He really played well in that game at Beaver Stadium where Maryland won. And he's the type of guy who they run a spread offense, and he likes to get the ball out of his hands quickly and guys in motion on the run. They use a lot of that pre-snap motion that we saw Penn State do against Ohio State. And while he doesn't have the strongest arm, I guess downfield, he's a really good passer, like in tight spaces, and he likes to make plays with both his feet and his arms. So he's going to be that dual threat guy that you have to keep an eye on, especially with the linebackers. They're going to have to spy on him and spy on the scramble to the outside as well. But with him, he's someone who tends to try to make the big play maybe a little too often.
Yep.
He's the most yards out of any Big Ten quarterback this year, but at the same time, he is tied for the most picks. So he's that guy where you're going to live and you're going to die with him. And he's really progressed well, I would say, over the time that he's transferred there. I think he's done really well. And this year, against the better defenses, though, it's definitely been less, improvement, I guess, than you would see against some of the bad teams they've played, because they started out 4-0 too. So it was they got off to a good start, and then they played Iowa and they just got flat out embarrassed both offensively and defensively. They got blown off the ball. The defense gave up 52 points, and the offense didn't play much better. So for me, I'm expecting out of Penn State's defense to, try to limit that short game. And, Hakeem Jarrett, of course, was great downfield, one of the receivers last year. So limiting the passing game is going to be critical, but at the same time, just keeping things in front of you and making sure that you're limiting, the big play and just trying to, play for another down is going to be critical for this defense.
Yeah, and as you said, they rely heavily on the pass. So secondary, we've seen this is arguably the best secondary that Penn State's had in a long time in terms of being just well-rounded, experienced. So they shouldn't have any problems with any of their receivers. This is a good game to also work on your run defense since they are a pass-heavy team. Make sure, as you said, keep everything in front of you. Don't give up those big chunk plays. Don't let somebody drive for the dirty like three or four yards on a third down. You just have to get 3 and outs all the time, but also force Tagovailoa to throw the ball down the field. As you said, he leads the Big Ten in interceptions. So let your secondary make plays, get pressure on him, get the ball out of his hands, and make plays when you have them in front of you. You can't have any of those drop picks like we've seen in recent games, because as we've seen, they can cost you some victories. So they really do need to be ready, tip drill. Hope they were practicing that this week.
Yeah.
But, keep everything in front of you and rely on your secondary, really.
Yeah, I think they're definitely going to be honing in on, Hakeem Jarrett a lot, especially since last year he was awesome, and he looked really good against Penn State. I'm definitely interested to watch that matchup between him and Joey Porter, which I think could be, a fun one to watch because they're both really talented guys and guys who, have not only NFL-type skill sets, but NFL-type physicality as well. Of course, they're both being, a little big for their position. So that's going to be probably the matchup to watch, I would say, when Penn State's on defense and Maryland's on offense.
Yeah, and transitioning to their defense, this could be a game where we see once again that Yurcich gets so many receivers involved because contrary to Penn State's secondary, Maryland's secondary isn't the best by any means. So this could be a game where you get a lot of your receivers involved. This may be the game to build up some of your tight ends' confidence in catching the ball. Brenton Strange, please work on those hand skills. But no, this is a good game to work on that kind of stuff and get a lot of people involved. Hit those easy slants across the middle, like Clifford has shown that he's able to do. Just get some nice plays. Maybe hit Dotson on that long throw down the field. But this is a good game to work on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that offensively, Maryland has some really weird stats defensively because, their secondary is thought of as, their weakest spot, I guess. And that's probably just coverage-wise down the field. I would say with their cover corners, they're probably not, the most talented group. I watched that game against Iowa, and Iowa doesn't have the most talented receivers in the world, and they got absolutely blown off the ball. And if Dotson and Parker Washington can continue to play, those complementary roles that they continue to do with Parker being so good in the short game, and of course, Jahan being Jahan everywhere this year. And if they can kind of play off each other and, they got in that, I think it was the one drive, I want to say towards the end of the third quarter of Ohio State, they were just getting chunk yardage every time because they just made their one move and went, like whether it was a post across the middle or across the top or just a slant shallow. I mean, Clifford was making the right reads at the same time, but also the receivers were getting really good space. So just getting out in space and letting those athletes get out and run, like you said, Brenton Strange would be nice to get him going, but I liked what I saw from Theo Johnson against Ohio State, too.
100%. And also, dare I talk about the run game for however many weeks? Obviously, it hasn't been the best.
We gave up on that.
But also, you get past their front seven and break into the secondary and get into space. This could be a game to make some guys miss. I mean, get past those front seven, and as we said, secondary, if they're worried about, trying to lock down on their receivers out on the outside, if you break in there, you could be seeing a field day for this run game. This would certainly be the week to do it ahead of their matchups with Michigan, Michigan State, and then back home here against Rutgers. So last time I guess I'll mention the run game, but this is definitely the game to work on that.
Yeah. With the run game, the one thing I'm just going to say is I thought the offensive line actually did much better against Ohio State in terms of the run, but at the same time, we still have to see more from just the running backs themselves. I know Juwan Sider, who talked to the media today, said that, Noah Cain has put a lot of pressure on himself this year, and obviously he hasn't had the year that anyone, I'm sure, including himself, was expecting. But he's coming back from injury, and he was expected to be that feature back, and he said he just has to take a little of that pressure off himself, which is, part of the reason I think we saw a good dose of Kevon Lee and John Lovett, especially against Ohio State. So getting him to regain that confidence and potentially getting him back next year is going to be critical. So getting him going over these next few games, while it may not be, important to this season, it's going to be important for their future because he's still someone who they think very highly of. And if Penn State's going to be successful in the future, they're going to have to get the running game going, and Noah Cain's going to be back for that, and he's going to be a big part of it. So
yeah, definitely. And I liked what Jaywan Sider said today about how efficient the running backs were on third down. I mean, we just talked about how efficient Penn State's offense was overall in third down conversions, and he said while it may not have shown up particularly on the stat sheet, it showed up when Penn State really needed it. They were able to convert a lot of those third downs because Kevon Lee was able to do what he does and drive for those dirty 3-4 yards and get a first down. So, yeah, that's just what they need to continue to do. And while they're not going to be putting up, 150, 200 rushing yards a game, we know that's not going to happen. But, just being able to get the dirty yardage that you need to extend these drives, especially against Maryland where you really do need to put some points on the board, get some confidence back in your offense, and yeah, that's all they really need to do in the run game. And I know we want to highlight the player we got to talk to in media after practice on Wednesday. Curtis Jacobs was able to speak with the media after Wednesday's practice, and he's just a great guy to ask questions to. He's just so willing and open to answer all these questions. And I think one of my favorite answers from him on Wednesday was he was asked about Micah Parsons.
Yeah.
Before the reporter could even finish the question, he's like, "What are you talking about? That's my dog." Yeah. So, yeah, he talked a lot about his relationship with Micah Parsons and how they do keep in contact. And, yeah, that was my favorite answer from him. But he gave us a lot of good stuff on Wednesday.
Yeah, we were able to talk to Curtis not only Wednesday, but after Ohio State, too. And by the way, against Ohio State, it was by far his best game I think we've seen from him. He is really blossoming, at that Sam linebacker spot. And that's a spot that we've seen Penn State linebackers in the past, including Brandon Smith, who's still on the team, kind of develop there and become, use their athleticism in that spot where it's such a tough position because it's almost like a slot corner in its uniqueness where, one play you're guarding Garrett Wilson, up the seam, but the next play, you got to get on a big tight end like Jeremy Rucker who can, bulldoze you over at any time you want, so at any time he wants. So I think he is really acclimated to the position in a really good way, and I think Penn State should be really encouraged. And there's no doubt that he can be, a future will linebacker like a Brandon Smith, and his athleticism combined with, the confidence he's gaining too. Which I asked him about the confidence, and he was like, "With your development, you can just feel it grow every week." And he's like, "You just whether it's knowing scheme, whether it's making the big play." It just every time you understand a concept or make a play or, make a positive impact on the game, it just continues to allow you to get better. And getting better is gaining confidence. And that's just what he continued to emphasize. And, I think he's taken a real mature approach to this position where, he not only knows it's a challenge, he is willingly accepting of the challenge. So I think Penn State in that area with the linebacker group has a really nice future ahead of them with Curtis leading that charge.
Yeah, and I like how you said he was willing to take on more responsibility, especially after last year, after Micah Parsons opted out. His role, he probably saw more time than he expected to, extended time, and more than the coaching staff may have thought. But he got a lot of that experience last year, and now he's having a bigger role and is excelling in it. So good for him.
And he's a Maryland kid, so he's excited for this game this weekend.
Yes.
A lot of them on this Penn State team.
All right, Justin. Always ending on this. 3 keys to the game.
All right. So we talked about this Maryland secondary for a little bit. We talked about their coverage skills not being great. The safeties somehow lead both safeties. Nick Cross is one who was a big Penn State recruit in the James Franklin era who ended up committing to Maryland. But the 2 safeties lead the team in tackles, which is like not good if you're Maryland, just because that means your front isn't getting the job done. But at the same time, to me, that means that the corners are also, struggling a little bit, and that they can be certainly targeted, like we talked about with Dotson, Parker, Keandre Lambert-Smith, those guys. So, to me, it's, get the passing attack going early. We understand that the run game is not what you thought it was going to be, and I think they recognize that at this point too, and I guess pretty much anyone else that watches their film. So, if Clifford's 100% healthy, getting the passing game going can not only, of course, get guys like Jahan, Parker, Keandre going, but if Sean can get on the run again, like we've seen him do when he's at his best, then I think that's going to be the best way for them to attack this Maryland defense. So I would try to get that passing game going early, and, if it's not working out and you get in those third, second, and short situations, you can always go back to the run like with Kevon Lee did last week with, getting those, like you said, 30 yards with those short yardage situations. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, for sure. Key number 2, something we built upon last week.
Yeah, run defense is going to be imperative in this game because obviously we know what Maryland does in the passing attack, so that's something they're going to be honed in on. But the D-line's got to do their job, of course. They improved tremendously, like we talked about in the beginning, last week against Maryland, or my apologies, against Ohio State, pulled a James Franklin. But anyway, they really just got to continue to close the gaps like they did. Keziah Izzard, Devon Elise, filling in for P.J. Musfer is not easy. That's a big dude, a talented dude, and he was so good at stopping the run. And that's a big piece that they're missing for the rest of the year. There's no doubt about it that has certainly been a key contributing factor. And I think they talk about Sean Clifford being healthy for the Illinois game, how that would have changed it. If P.J. Musfer is healthy for that game, they don't lose that game. So it's going to be important to keep up that run defense the rest of the year. They improved tremendously against Ohio State. They're going to have to continue to try to emulate that for the rest of the year. So key number 2, keep up the run stop like they did last week.
All right, and key number 3, one of the important statistics that James Franklin talks about after every game.
Yeah, I hate this to be a key because it's so basic, but winning the turnover battle is critical because Penn State, you could say, almost outplayed Ohio State last week, but at the same time, they lost the turnover battle by a good margin, 3-1. So, and they didn't even take advantage of the one turnover that they got. So, making sure you're cleaning that up this week and getting that back to where they like it, because they've done a really good job actually the whole year. Like we've always said, Sean has done a good job of protecting the football. Running backs, I think the Noah Cain fumble was the first fumble loss for a Penn State running back this year. So just cleaning that up a little bit. Of course, it is always going to help on the scoreboard when you're, winning the possession battle, winning the turnover battle. So just making sure you're protecting the football, not giving Maryland any easy opportunities against a Penn State defense that has played, pretty well over the course of the entire season. So just keeping the ball in your offense's hands and, not giving Maryland any easy opportunities. It's going to be big.
Awesome. All right. Penn State on the road at Maryland on Saturday. We'll be back to break it all down for you next week. Tune into next week's episode of the Collegian Football Podcast. For Justin, I'm Alexis. We'll see you here next week.